Greetings, greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome. This is a video that I'm creating on logical fallacies. This video will primarily be for English 102 when I teach it. I always like to teach these right before the third essay, the exploratory essay. Just for the simple reason you guys are finding arguments, doing these annotated bibliographies. You found arguments. Well, the next stage is going to be to actually interpret the arguments, analyze them. So, according to the rules of logic, there are incorrect ways of reasoning. Okay? And so, what my job then is to kind of go over like ways that you should not reason, as far as ways of being logical. So, as far as that goes, there's a difference between logic and rhetoric. So some of these things that we'll see in this slideshow, these are things that people do when they make arguments. Sometimes it's maybe an appeal to emotion instead of an appeal to logic or something to that effect. So I'm going to train you. These are called logical fallacies, or incorrect ways of argument. These are informal logical fallacies. Logic is a whole kind of like mathematical subject. Formal fallacies are a little different than informal fallacies. And so, like, fallacy just pretty much just means incorrect. It's an erroneous way of reasoning. And so, let's get straight to it then. All of you guys will find through this slide, all of you, have done these. You probably use them on a daily basis. Maybe you're arguing with your mom or your significant other or what have you. But as this slide says, a fallacy is a particular type of incorrect argument. Informal fallacies contain errors in the content of an argument. So the first one is the appeal to emotion. So you guys probably know about logos, ethos, and pathos. Ethos is an appeal to emotion. But if we're just operating within the rules of logic, appeals to emotion, or maybe an appeal to your emotions, or maybe an appeal to your patriotism, something like that. It's an erroneous way of argument. And so we see this advertisement from 1957. So this Coke ad, right? It's an advertisement. It's wanting you to buy Coke. It's wanting you to be cool, like the people in this photo. It's a sign of good taste, right? You want to look like this Biff from Back to the Future looking guy. You want to be with this hot babe with the white teeth. You're this cool because you have a Coke, right? So this is advertising. If we're operating within the rules of logic, advertising and things like that, you might ask yourself, well, there's all kinds of commercials on TV that try to appeal to your emotions. Political season, there's all kinds, as well as the dog commercials or the pet commercials where they show you all the abused animals and want you to donate, to helping get them home. Those where they play the sad music, right? That's a way of appealing to somebody's emotions, to get them on your side. So if it seems overly kind of done emotionally speaking, they're wanting you to get on your side by kind of drowning you in emotional appeals. That's an appeal to emotion fallacy. The next one is called the red herring. A red herring. So a red herring is a distraction from an argument. Everybody does these at some point. So the question, are you having an affair? How can you ask a question like that? Don't I work hard for a living? Do I drink, use drugs, or gamble? Don't I help out around the house? Aren't you always saying that I'm great with the kids? What kind of a man do you think I am? All right, so you guys see what's happening. The husband in this case, or the boyfriend, is not directly answering the question. Instead, he's purposefully kind of like throwing a wrench into it to distract the wife with another point entirely. So he's kind of like, he's playing defensive here, right? He's purposefully distracting her to try to throw her off base from the main point at hand to begin with. So that is a red herring, right? There's a point at hand. Instead of directly addressing the point, you just kind of throw a wrench in, make it, and distract the reader to thinking about something else. The straw man is the next one. It is so a straw man is an intentionally weak version of an opponent's argument, one that is easily refuted. So basically what this means, you have a very complex argument. So let's say immigration for the purposes of this meme. You have a really complex argument with multiple sides. So what a straw man does is it purposefully tries to make that one side look extremely ridiculous. It kind of simplifies an entire complex debate, maybe into something like a meme, maybe something like a catchphrase. There's kind of like written ways you can do this too, right? Not to get too political, but like a phrase like "war on coal," right? That's a straw man, right? Because you're simplifying the whole complex argument about immigration or about our power supply, what we're using for power, and you're turning it into a catchphrase, right? So immigrants are stealing your jobs. Tell me more about how you've always wanted to be a taxi driver, right? So that's making that the sort of conservative side about immigrants look ridiculous, because saying nobody wants to take those jobs like being a taxi driver, right? So multiple layers to an argument, but tries to purposely kind of like make it look ridiculous. That's a straw man. Ad hominem is an attack against the person. So rather than attacking the ideas that a person is giving out, you're pretty much attacking the person instead, right? So we see this Peanuts meme. That's an ad hominem fallacy, Calvin. Your face is an ad hominem, right? So he's just pretty much throwing an insult out at her, right? Rather than arguing with her about their points. So again, this is something that's often used in politics. You've probably used it yourself at some point. You're arguing, trying to tear down somebody's credibility rather than arguing the point at hand. Tool of force is basically what it means. You're trying to argue and get somebody on your side by threatening them in some way. So this example on the slideshow was from the 80s, and there was an entire kind of controversy back in the 80s about President Reagan selling weapons, perhaps illegally, to Afghanistan. So the chief of staff says the president continues to have confidence in the attorney general, and I have confidence. You ought to have confidence because we work for the president. anyone has a different view of that, you can tell me about it because we're going to have to discuss your status. So that's pretty much an offhanded way of threatening somebody. Hey, don't question this anymore, or we're going to have to see if you even have a job later, right? Fear is a good way to get people on your side, right? This is often used, all the time in politics too, right? From both sides. So somebody's appealing to your force, saying, well, if you vote for this person, you're out of the job, or something like that. See through it, right? It's an appeal to force. Missing the point. This is when there's a disconnect between premises and conclusions, right? Remember, a conclusion is kind of like the main idea of an argument. Premise is kind of like the building blocks of an argument. So I don't like the idea of metal detectors and armed guards in our neighborhood schools. Don't you care about our children? So the idea of caring about the children, that's doesn't necessarily have anything to do with maybe why this person doesn't like the idea of metal detectors and armed guards. Maybe the person thinks that's detrimental to the educational environment or something of that nature. It's just a complete disconnect, right? The person has just kind of lost the point along the way what the argument actually was. Argument from ignorance. Argument from ignorance is when you say something is true just because it hasn't yet been proven false. Okay? So I borrowed this slideshow from one of my old philosophy teachers. In a class like philosophy, you always argue big questions, like the existence of God. Does God exist? I don't think so. No one has ever been able to prove it. Of course he exists. No one has ever proven that God doesn't. And that's basically saying, we haven't proven that it doesn't exist, so he must exist. Right? He must. It doesn't say that he might exist. That wouldn't be a fallacy. It's saying he must exist because no one has proven that he doesn't. You guys can kind of see what's going on here. Inappropriate authority, when you rely on the judgment of people who have no legitimate claim to authority in the matter at hand. Paris Hilton says Obama will make a good president, and she's voting for him, so I will too. Well, you might ask yourself, who the hell is Paris Hilton, to make these claims, and why should we pay attention to Paris? Of course, this slide is kind of cynical, right? Maybe Paris Hilton is actually a well-read, lady. She's read her political science, right? She knows all this stuff. So, you guys can kind of see the point, right? She doesn't have credibility, maybe, to give like a opinion that you would rely upon, right? False calls. So another name for false calls is slippery slope. Okay, slippery slope. The false calls / slippery slope argues that one thing is the cause of an effect when it is not. So this is about euthanasia, the idea of physician-assisted suicide. Once we allow doctors to shorten the life of patients who request it, doctors could and would wantonly kill burdensome patients who do not want to die. So this is pretty much saying doctors are going to turn into serial killers, right? If we allow physician-assisted suicide to become a thing, right? If we allow this, we're going to go down this slope, right? We're going to go down the hill, no return. We can't come back from it. False cause / slippery slope. Hasty generalization is a category fallacy. So you're saying what is true of one member of a particular class or group is so for all members of that class. So the slideshow says, take Martin, he's been eating really bad his whole life. So what better proof could there be for good health than a friar's son? You guys can kind of see what's going on here. Taking Martin's experience, you're applying it to everyone. Neat. We all do this at some point. Common joke in West Virginia is Ohio drivers can't drive, right? So maybe you get stuck behind one going 60 and a 70. You're like, those darn Ohio drivers, they don't know how to drive worth a lick. Right? So taking what's true of one person and applying it to the whole state of Ohio. So while that might be right, while that might be correct, it is still a logical fallacy, right? It's an erroneous way of reasoning. Some of these later ones I don't have to cover so much. Equivocation, when you're purposefully confusing two or more legitimate meanings of a word. We have Lewis Carroll here, right? So nobody is the word that it's playing on. Probably the most famous example in history of something like this is Bill Clinton. Right? Bill Clinton said, "I did not have sex with Monica Lewinsky." Now, what was he doing? He was purposefully confusing two or more meanings of the word sex. Right? So he didn't have sexual intercourse with her, but he did do other things. Right? So that is an equivocation. You're twisting more than one meaning of a word to suit your purpose. I think that's it. So over the coming days, you guys are kind of resting from the annotated bibliography. You're working on your midterms. I'm speaking for my spring 19 class. Some of you might be watching this PowerPoint in the future. But generally in the class when we do this, it's at that point you've just finished your annotated bibs, you're working on your midterms. So we're going to do some practice. I'm going to give you some practice quizzes. And then at the end of the sequence, I'll actually give you a real quiz that I'll count for a couple of homework grades. So use this slideshow. Use this video for your benefit. Hopefully, you can kind of see through these fallacies as we work on them. So until next time, you guys take care.